Napoleon's downfall. So after um, Napoleon is not able to conquer Russia and has to retreat back, his enemies unite and capitalize on France's weakness. And Napoleon at this point will suffer defeat. He raised a new army and he went to attack his enemies, but was defeated at the Battle of Leipzig in October 1813. Now, he is able to raise a large army, but remember, this army is going to be hastily trained, hastily equipped. They're not going to be seasoned veterans. And on top of that, Napoleon, at this point, doesn't have his strategic brilliance. He begins to just try and hammer it out against his enemies instead of trying to outmaneuver and outflank them as he did in previous battles. So as a result, he was very unsuccessful. By January of 1814, the Allies were into French territory and were pushing towards Paris. By March of 1814, Frederick William III of Prussia and Alexander I of Russia were leading troops in a parade through Paris. Napoleon had fled Paris with his generals and part of his army, but his capital city had been taken, which would be a huge slap in the face to him and his country. In April, Napoleon wants to then try and fight back and take back the capital, but his generals refuse to fight any longer. So Napoleon is forced to accept the terms of surrender from the Allies. Here you see Napoleon in his later years. He is not the same type of person. Being emperor is beginning to weigh on him. He's overweight. He's beginning to have health issues at this point. Very downtrodden. Definitely giving aspect to heavy is the head that wears the crown. Part of this terms of surrender is that Napoleon would be banished to the island of Elba, small island off the coast of Italy, and here he's allowed to basically be emperor of the small island. He leads the government, gets the country's economy going. However, it's no France, it's no center stage, it's not Europe. During this 100 days that he's on this island, he is basically waiting for an opportunity to get back to France. Louis XVI's brother assumes the throne. He becomes Louis XVII, and he becomes King of France. Problem is, no one in France this time wants a king. Things go badly in France. There's lots of problems. So on March 1st, 1815, Napoleon escapes the island, travels through the British blockade, gets back into France, is crowned emperor, and raises a new army. Then the Allies marshal their armies under the Duke of Wellington from Great Britain and prepare for a pitched battle at Waterloo, which is in Belgium. The two armies meet each other there. On June 18th, Napoleon attacked. At this point, the British are there, but their allies had not gotten to the battleground yet. The British need to hold their ground and wait for the Allies to get there. Once that happens, they'll have superior numbers and they'll be able to beat Napoleon. So Napoleon figures if he can break through the British line, he can defeat the British, get the high ground, wait for the Prussians to get there, and do the same. However, the British hold strong. They remain in their defensive positions. They stopped cavalry after cavalry charge. They stopped the infantry charge, and they hold their ground. Napoleon at that point backed off. Had he continued to press the attack, he may have punctured through the British lines, but he didn't. He reassembled his army and then waited. By this time, the Prussians had arrived in the afternoon, and they combined forces with the British there and defeated the French. At this point, Napoleon was sent to St. Helena, which is an island in the South Atlantic. He lived there for 6 years, where he wrote his memoirs and died of a stomach ailment in 1821, most likely stomach cancer. Napoleon's legacy. He had many victories in battle, and in his early stages he was a great general, but it cost the lives of millions of young men. Alex de Tocqueville summed it up pretty well. He said he was as great as a man can be without having any virtue. The Congress of Vienna. So after Napoleon is gone, the Allies get together and figure out what are they going to do with France, with the rest of Europe. How are they going to get things back to the way that they used to be? Clemens von Metternich from Austria has a plan for Europe. He's the most influential delegate there, and his ideas form the Congress. The Big Five, Russia, Prussia, Austria, England, and France, will be the main powers in Britain. He distrusted the ideas of the French Revolution, so he wanted to get rid of them. He wanted to put monarchs back on the throne, return things to the way that they used to be. He also wanted to put laws in each country that wouldn't change. Now, what had happened is Napoleon took over territories, brought the Napoleonic Code. Then, when those places were liberated from French rule, whoever was put in charge got rid of those rules, put new rules in. So they really wanted to define laws for certain territories that wouldn't change, as they had done several times in the past few decades. There were three basic goals of the Congress of Vienna. The first goal was to prevent future aggression of France by surrounding France with stronger countries. So you have France and you contain it by putting strong countries at its borders, so that before they can get to any of the other big five countries, they have to go through these smaller countries. They also wanted to have a balance of power in Europe, meaning that no country would be a threat to others. So France wouldn't rise to such power that it would threaten Great Britain or Russia or anyone else. They also wanted to restore Europe's royal families to the thrones held before Napoleon. When Napoleon came and conquered territory, oftentimes he would get rid of their king, put in one of his own family members, establish a different government. We saw that he deposed the Spanish king. So they want to put those guys back on the throne, stabilize those countries. For the containment aspect of France, the Austrian Netherlands and the Dutch Republic would combine to become the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The 39 German states on the French border would become the German Confederation with Austria at its head. Switzerland would become independent and then remain neutral for the rest of its existence. Sardinia was strengthened by getting Genoa. This is in Italy, so it's strengthening Italian city-states. A balance of power. The idea here is to bend but not break France. If you were to break France, give them harsh punishments, they want to seek revenge. It would lead to future wars. So they wanted to strengthen other nations around France to create that balance of power. Legitimacy. Former monarchs would stabilize their countries. They had been there before. They might not have had 100% approval rating, but they could stabilize things. They would stop more change. They wanted to make sure they did not sow the seeds for future wars. And ultimately they were quite successful. There were 40 years of peace between the big five countries until the Crimean War. Political changes beyond Vienna. The Congress was a victory for the conservatives, or the people who don't want change, who want the monarchs to remain in power. The other big one is the Holy Alliance. This is Austria, Prussia, and Russia. That countries with Christian principles with other nations would work with each other to prevent revolutions. So if a revolution happened in Prussia, and Austria and Russia would help out. The idea was stop the revolution before it becomes so big that you have another Napoleon, another France. Basically, they didn't want history to repeat itself. The Concert of Europe. That's not a musical concert. Concert of Europe as in Europe in agreement. Many of the kings of Europe realized that to help prevent another warfare like they just fought with Napoleon, that if a revolt did occur in a country, the other one should band together to help out. However, radical ideas still flourish. Some other things that happened: revolutions in Latin America. Many of the Creoles took power after the Spanish king was deposed. So in the Spanish colonies, they had no king as their ruler, so they decided, since there is no king here, and since there's a new king, a foreign king that we owe no allegiance to, this is our time to become independent. When the king becomes reinstated, royalists try to get back their power, take over those colonies, and it's going to lead to the independence movement, which we'll talk about in later chapters. Eventually it's going to lead to Mexico and Brazil becoming completely independent. The long-term legacy of Napoleon. France began to decline on the world stage, and England and Prussia began to rise. You also will get the nationalist movements in Italy, Germany, and Greece, which is going to lead to future revolutions and other problems in Europe. That's the end of the slideshow for chapter 23.